It is indeed my privilege, yes, to introduce to you Kenneth Long, Dr. Ken Long, an Australian business consultant. Throughout his life, he has helped businesses to improve their competitiveness and profitability. Yes. He started his career in industry as a lawyer. Ken has degrees in law, accounting, Master of Business Administration, specialty in marketing, and Doctor of Business Administration. And his area of research was innovation. But beside that, Ken is a stewardship champion of his own kind. He's passionate about stewardship in all its dimensions. Ken is also an author. His first book, and you can guess, was The Giving Equation, a mind-shifting perspective on why we should give. And this was released in June 2020, published by Science Publishing. His second book, and this is why we are here today, The Model Steward Canva, combines his passion for stewardship, promotion, and education with his business knowledge and experience. And we are glad to announce that this second book is published by the GC Stewardship Ministries. I would like to say this before Ken starts speaking. Ken is an accomplished writer. You can discuss an idea with him, and the next day and sometime the next hour, he will send you an improved version of this idea. This is Ken. But on a more spiritual note, I would like to say that Ken doesn't only teach and write about stewardship, but Ken is a practitioner of stewardship. And one thing that really tells that this morning is, do you know that he has graciously granted to the GC Stewardship Ministries and all affiliates organizations the authorization to translate and publish the book, The Model Steward Canva. And he has given this authorization at no cost. Thank you, Ken, for your spirit of generosity. The time is yours now. Please lead us in what you love.
That's very generous of you. Thank you for your kind thoughts. But I was a bit worried when you were muted at the beginning and you had nothing to say about me, at least the way that's how it came across. So thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to speak to you about my book, The Model Steward Canvas. Thank you, Marcus and Aniel, particularly for your kind invitation. It's a real honor to be able to speak to the Worldwide Stewardship Advisory and to speak to attendees all across the world. I was fortunate to be brought up in a family where generosity and faithfulness in giving were part of our DNA. My parents used to give about 30% of their income to church and charitable purposes. So I suppose it's just become part of my life. And I've been, as I said, very blessed to have that example in my life. So that's why I started writing about stewardship, because I think it's really one of the bad relations, I think, of the Bible, because, you know, it seems to get a bad rap. People really have poor understanding in many cases of stewardship. And so I really like to, I suppose, reframe some of the ideas around stewardship, because it is really such a positive message, and it's something I love. I call myself a bit of a stewardship activist. So the first part of my talk is really just setting the scene for the book. And then I'll give you a brief introduction, because we don't have a lot of time, but we won't go too in depth, but it will give you an idea of what the book's about. And look, later on, if you want further discussions, we can have that as well. So as Aniel said, we're making this free to the general conference because we really believe that stewardship is an important message which must be shared. So in terms of the Model Steward Canvas, I just want to just share with you what it's about, who it's for. This is just the introductory piece. So it's for people who want to start a new business with a kingdom purpose. And I want you to note the emphasis on kingdom purpose. It's for people who want to transition from an informal business. There are many of our church members who are subsistence farmers, or they work in the informal economy, but they want to transfer to increase the formality of their business, but also to have that kingdom purpose. The third point is that it's to transition Christians who are in business, but often Christians in business, their business is not defined by their Christianity. So it's to transition from being a Christian in business to a business with a defined and intentional kingdom purpose. So that's what I find. It's the intentionality which I think probably sets this apart. But it's also for church leaders who want to encourage entrepreneurship amongst their church members. And I'll give you an example of that a little later on. So in the Gospel of John, Jesus made 7 I am portraits. He did this to help us understand his identity. And in 7 different conversations, he made very specific, far-reaching, outrageous statements about himself. But he just doesn't claim to know these things, to explain these things. He blatantly says that he is these things. And these names Jesus chose for himself matter because they connect him to God. They demonstrate both the eternal and the personal nature of God, all the while inviting us into relationship with him. So we all know these. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And my favorite one is I am the good shepherd, where Jesus provides us a model for pastoral care and assures us of his provision. You know, the good shepherd came into this world to look after his sheep. The good shepherd provides for and sustains and protects his sheep, and he lays down his life for his sheep. But there's one I am statement that Jesus never made. And it's really surprising that he didn't make this I am statement, because 15% of everything he said was about this subject. And I'm sure you all know what that is. Jesus talked a lot about the role of the steward. You know, 16 of the 38 parables were concerned about how to handle money and possessions. In the Gospels, an amazing 1 in 10 verses, that's 288 verses in all, deal directly with the subject of money. While the Bible offers about 500 verses on prayer, but less than 500 on faith, there are more than 2,000 verses on money and possessions. So the I am statement that Jesus didn't make, and I've given it away here, is I am the model steward. I am the model steward. So if you look at Jesus' life, you know, you could say this is something that would encapsulate his life. Jesus' role as the model steward is encapsulated in his life and his teaching. It's encapsulated in everything he said and everything he did. It's encapsulated in every action and every sermon. And this provides a pattern for us on how to live our lives. And so you can see here, I've got 5 points. So as the model steward, Jesus followed God's will on a daily basis. He lived a life that was filled with radical and sacrificial giving. And look, we could talk about all of these things here for 10 or 15 minutes each, but we're just giving you the brief version. He lived a service-filled life. He was very single-minded. It was all about the kingdom, achieving God's kingdom purposes in his life. And he used his God's given blessings with compassion. Look, I found a really good way to sum this up. And I think as stewardship practitioners, you will all love this if you haven't seen it before. And it says, God's blessings, God's way for God's glory. Just say that to yourself. God's blessings, God's way for God's glory. That's really what stewardship is about. In 2019, Christina Hawkins, the then South Pacific Division Stewardship Director, and I went to New Guinea. And we ran a 2-day workshop on stewardship, discipleship, and business principles to about 100 Christian entrepreneurs at Goroka in Papua in New Guinea. And look, this is how they saw their Christian and their business lives. They saw that they were separate. They were two separate worlds that didn't intersect. We shared with them how God wants us to use God's blessings, God's way for God's glory, and how one of God's blessings was the business that they were operating. But they were shocked by this revelation, but they were really excited by it as well, because they loved their church and wanted to support it, but felt the church administration looked down on business people. So I told them a story about a friend of mine, friend Lorraine Hendra. This lady, she and her husband ran a business called Sydney Blinds and Screens, so they'd install screens and drapes and plantation shutters and these sorts of things. And the business was going okay, but one day Lorraine was driving home after work and she came across a car accident. And unfortunately, it involved her husband, and he died in that car accident, a very tragic occurrence. And after some grieving and some time of reflection, she decided that she would continue the business, even though, it really wasn't her role to run the business, but she felt that God wanted her to run the business. And so she said, did a bit of a deal with God, and she said that, and she dedicated the business to God. And she said that she would give all of the profits, not just some of the profits, all of the profits to God's work. All of the profits. That was amazing. And I know she did, because I helped I from time to time when I was involved in church projects, particularly school projects, I would go to her and say, Lorraine, is this something you could support? And invariably she did, and very, very generously, very, very generously. The blinds business is a low margin, high volume business, and that usually means low profits. But her business was extraordinarily profitable, and that was because of God's blessing. So ultimately, when ill health caused her to leave the business, she had two international companies fighting over her business because it was so profitable. And that was because God was really blessing this business. An amazing story. She told me a couple of years ago that the company that bought the business came to her and said, Lorraine, did you cook the books? Did you fiddle the figures? And she said, of course I didn't, because they had never been able to reproduce the profits that came when she ran the business because of God's blessing. And she said, look, I told you the secret to my success, that I was in partnership with God. So business, if we think of what business is, it's an exchange of values between two or more parties. So let's say I'm building furniture, I make this beautiful furniture for your house, and you pay some money. So that's an exchange of values. And so Dennis Peacock, an author, said, look, in this sense, gospel is business, because with the gospel, what we're trying to do is to share our Christian values and to get to replace other people's worldly values with our God-given values. So the gospel is business. Ellen White said basically, look, the Bible is a textbook for those who want to run a business. She said, there is no branch of legitimate business for which the Bible does not afford an essential preparation. So quite often we think that, look, business, it's got a bit of a tawdry feel to it or something like that. But here, Ellen White says, look, if it's a legitimate business, the Bible can provide lots of guidance, lots of understanding about how you should run a business and how you can run a successful business. And look, a lot of the biblical, my book is, The Model Steward Canvas is actually based on biblical principles. So I don't know if you've heard of Robert Tourneau. I think every stewardship person's heard of Robert Tourneau. He was an earth-moving contractor who had a desire to serve God, but he was unsure what to do. He really felt that, look, if I'm going to go all out for God, I really need to be a preacher, an evangelist, a pastor, or a missionary. But his pastor was quite an insightful man, and this is what he said to him. He said, God needs businessmen as well as preachers and ministries. And so this is what released Robert Tourneau to be probably the greatest inventor of infrastructure in the world. And so he built earth-moving equipment, bulldozers, cranes, all sorts of things. And the next slide you'll see. So this is what he said about his partnership with God. He said, by accepting God as your partner, no limit can be placed on what can be achieved. I don't know if any of you guys know Pastor Mel Rees, Elder Mel Rees. I met him back in 1985, and he came out to Australia, and I learned a lot from him about stewardship, and I commend his book. But he actually wrote a book called God and Man Unlimited, and it's really along the same theme here. So by accepting God as your partner, and let's say business partner, no limit can be placed on what can be achieved. When you go into partnership with God, you've got a partner closer and more active than any human partner can ever be. Now, if you see the figures here that I've got down on the right-hand side of the column here, you've got 90%. So Robert Tourneau's wife said to him one day, look, we're doing so well, I think we should flip the tithe thing around. So instead of giving 10%, they gave 90% to God as the tithe commitment. The 300 is the number of patents this man had in terms of this infrastructure, which you can see on this slide. 300. That is an extraordinary amount of patents. And so in World War II, 70% of the infrastructure machinery that was used by the Allies came from Robert Tourneau's patents. Isn't that amazing? God really blessed this man, and he only went to ninth grade in school. So in my book, I've adopted the term business as mission because there are many other terms which describe this relationship between God and business. Business as mission, it's the intentional combination or integration of two concepts, business and mission. But the idea of integration is important. This is not ministry with business tacked on for convenience or business tacked onto ministry. Instead, mission is worked out in and through the business, through its activities, through the products or services, and through the relationships of that business. In many respects, it's friendship evangelism with a Christian context. So here you can see the definition of business as mission. It's a business operated on biblical principles and values by a Christian entrepreneur, which aims to be a profitable business which brings glory to God and has a kingdom impact. It's intentional about its kingdom purpose. So this is the intention part is very, very critical to this book, and really how I believe people who are acting as model stewards in their business should act. It's focused on the 4 Ps of the quadruple bottom line: people, planet, profit, and God's purpose. Now, in the secular world, it's usually the first 3. They talk about the 3 Ps, but here's the 4 Ps: people, planet, profit, and God's purpose. And it's also, I believe, it's important part is a significant part of the profits. That's up to the business owner. Significant part of the profits from the business are used for kingdom and charitable purposes. So look, what this book is about building capability in our church members. So I'm sure you've seen something similar along these lines. It says, give a man a fish and you have fed him for today. Teach a man to fish and you have fed him for a lifetime. And this is the critical part. Teach a man how to establish a fishing business and you'll not only feed him for a lifetime, but bring benefits to his family, the community, and in our case, I've added the church. All right, isn't that good? Teach a man to fish, to establish a fishing business, and you not only feed him for a lifetime, but you bring benefits to his family, his community, and his church. And in many respects, particularly in developing countries, this is moving somewhat from the informal to the formal economy. So if you look at our church, you can see how the church population has shifted by continent since this goes back to 1950, and the latest figures we've got here is 2015. But you can see where there's a huge concentration now in terms of Southeast Asia, South America, Africa. And so there's a lot of countries here which don't have the financial resources that a lot of the other Western world countries have. And so, you know, it was put to me, I was talking to Gary Krause, who's head of Adventist Mission, and he said, look, many of these countries can be termed developing countries, and they're receiving a lot of subsidies and that sort of thing from other parts of the church. But his idea was that it would be good if all of these countries could be more contributing to their own strategies and plans, and contributing also to the world church. So in Papua New Guinea mission, the growth rate is about 7% per annum. Their per capita tithe is about 79 Australian dollars. So that's probably, I don't know, 68 maybe US dollars or something like that. And they felt they needed to do something. And so they came up with a strategic initiative called Holistic Sustainable Development. And this involves two things around entrepreneurship. One is they want to establish a baseline for all Adventist entrepreneurs in their area. So they want to do a bit of a stock take. Who are all the Adventist entrepreneurs within our church? The second thing, though, was they want 0.5% of their church members to become entrepreneurs each year. So isn't that a good goal? They want 0.5% of their church members to become entrepreneurs each year. And so they have a population of about 400,000 Adventists in their area. So I understand that they have a pastor to member ratio of about 1 to 2,000. So let's play the what if game. If Papua New Guinea can achieve this goal of 0.5% per year, then that's of their 400,000 members, that would mean that they would start 2,000 businesses each year. 2,000 businesses each year. Now, many of those would be small businesses, and they may make some more money, but some of those businesses could become very large and profitable businesses. So wouldn't it be wonderful if these sorts of initiatives could lead to the ratio, for instance, of pastors to church members of being something like 1 to 750? And consider what the growth rate would be in a place like Papua New Guinea if they had more resources. So again, moving from receiving to contributing. When we talk about business, we talk about a business model. And in a business model, we talk about three things. So firstly, we have to create value. We have to create value for our customers. What are we going to sell them? Is it what product or service are we going to sell them? We then have to deliver it to them. So in this case, it's a physical delivery, but sometimes it's delivered online. Sometimes it might be delivered in a retail store and those sort of things. The other side of it is we have to capture value. We have to capture value. So this then here is the Christian side of it. It's the same thing, create value, deliver value, capture value. But what we've added here is to create kingdom value. Now, Milton Alphonse is in the business of giving. He's a Seventh-day Adventist lawyer and businessman committed to advancing the church's mission. In 1971, through his insight, entrepreneurial spirit, he founded Golden Cross International Medical Healthcare. Started off with 5 employees, but by 1985, the company had become an industry leader in Brazil and South America. Look, there might be more to this story, but it's hard to get commentary in English. So if you know more about it, I'd love to know more. But Milton didn't want to be just a businessman. He wanted to be an angel, that's his word, to people that he touched. This is business mission. And he's an angel by providing free social welfare services to some of his employees who can't afford even an appointment. He builds shelters and special schools for orphans and abandoned children, providing them with clothes and food, etc. But education is one of his key areas because he believes education is the key to getting out of poverty. And he has provided more than 60,000 scholarships for young people. So he invests in these young lives for those who often feel they don't have a future. So now we get to the model steward canvas. So this is it here. So you can see it's a plan on a page. It has 12 elements to it. And the idea is that there are a series of questions posed here, but the book goes into all this in much, much more detail. And it helps a prospective entrepreneur, prospective business person to actually plan their business. And so you can see here, you come up with the business. So imagine that you wanted to start a health food restaurant. You'd serve breakfast, lunch and dinner, takeaway, and you wanted to locate your business in a tourist area. And you had certain business goals. You wanted to earn so much revenue, so much profit. The business has a specific purpose. So maybe the purpose of your business was to glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that's entrusted to you and to have a positive influence on all who come in contact with your business. We'll talk about spiritual imperative later, but customer segments you might have. You want to deal with health conscious diners and health conscious tourists, people who are time poor, who want the takeaway thing. So you can see here there's a whole, I suppose, spectrum of ways you can actually develop your framework for your business. And as I said, the book is about almost 200 pages, so it explains all of this in detail. So we're just going to look at a few of these things just to explain some of them, so you can see how the intentionality of having the kingdom purpose comes through. So the biggest thing is purpose. One of the world's leading leadership speakers is a guy called Simon Sinek, and he talks about how purpose is the thing which drives an organization. So he said there's two ways you can drive an organization. You can either manipulate people, manipulate your customers, or you can inspire them. And the thing which inspires them is purpose. And so look, I've got an example here of Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A is a large American fast food chain. In 2019, it had $11 billion in sales. And what I love about Chick-fil-A is this, it spells out its purpose very, very publicly. It says its purpose is to glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that is entrusted to us, to have a positive influence on all who come in contact with Chick-fil-A. Now, isn't that amazing that a company of this size is putting it out there so openly, so bluntly, so intentionally about what their purpose is? So they really want to be a kingdom business. And I just love the fact that it is just so open, it's so overt, it's so public about what they do. There's another company, this is a stationery company. And you know, what they do is they've committed to giving 50% of their profits to local charities in their area. And so when they go out and talk to customers, they don't talk about stationery, they go and talk about their purpose, because look, a ream of paper is a ream of paper is a ream of paper. And, you know, it might cost you $5 here or $4.99, but at the end of the day, there's not that much difference. So they talk about their purpose, and their purpose is to donate millions of dollars to our non-profit partners by becoming one of the largest independent retailers in the US. So if you're going to buy some stationery and the price is much the same, who are you going to buy from? Of course, you're going to buy from Buy on Purpose, simply because you know that their profits are going to a positive purpose. One of the other elements of the model steward canvas is scriptural imperative. So I think, Marcus, last night you talked about Matthew 6:33. So many Christian entrepreneurs have a verse of scripture which defines their purpose or guides their business principles. The spiritual imperative provides the drive, the passion, the energy for business owners to succeed and support kingdom business. So this is what Robert Tourneau said. Robert Tourneau's, at one stage, his business was doing badly. He had a partner who was letting him down. I think he was drinking the profits. He had a child, the child died, and he just thought, what's going on? But he got this message from God, and God said to him, Robert, you've been working hard, but for the wrong things. You've been working for material things when you should have been working for spiritual things. And this is something we could say to a lot of our Christian entrepreneurs. They're Christians who are running a business, but they're not Christians who have this kingdom purpose. This is what he says. I discovered then that God loves us so much that he wants us to love him in return. He wants us to cooperate with his program. That's business's mission. He wants us to cooperate with his program. Matthew 6:33 says, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all of these things shall be added to you. That I had not been doing. I had been seeking first my own way of life, and I firmly believe God had to send these difficulties into our lives to get us to look up into his face and call upon him. So our lessons this quarter are Christ in the crucible. And sometimes it's going through that crucible experience is something which I suppose makes you sit up and take notice. And in this case, Matthew 6:33 was the message which drove his life. And you can see here, up here, this is actually a screenshot from this text, which is actually on his tombstone, Matthew 6:33. But there are many texts there. You know, you could think of Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. There are just so many different texts which you could use. And over the past 2 nights, we've already heard many of these texts which could actually help an entrepreneur drive their business, keep them kingdom focused. Another part is Christian values. Look, some of these things are pretty obvious, but lots of businesses have these things in terms of integrity, excellence in customer service, excellence in business. And the thing, as Ellen White said, the Bible is a textbook for the Christian entrepreneur. And you can see here how many of these texts here really are things that we're familiar with, but they are really good guiding lights for a business. Integrity, to do what is right and just is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. Integrity is about Christ-centered living. It's about doing what is right rather than doing what is expedient. And so, many times in business, you find them doing something that's just good for the business, but it's not necessarily right from a moral perspective. It's not really right for the customer. It's not really right by the employee. And so that's why those 4 Ps are so important. Excellence in customer service. Well, look, this comes from the golden rule. Why is it such a surprise? So the Bible is just full of examples of Christian values, which should be business values. So then, here are the values of buy on purpose. Excellence. We will give our best in everything that we do and provide quality products to all our customers. So it's no good just providing a product and make a good profit. We must make quality products for our customers. We'll treat each other with dignity and respect that each person deserves. Very Christian values. And so selflessness. We will always put our customers first. Serving our customers will always be our number 1 priority. One of the other elements here is stakeholders. So in a business, you have internal stakeholders, the directors and investors. You have external stakeholders, the customers, suppliers, etc. But in our business, because we're running a Christian business, we have the ultimate stakeholder. And the foundation of the Model Steward Canvas is that God owns everything. He gives us these resources. They're ours to use. Remember, God's blessings, God's way for God's glory. And so the question I say to Christian entrepreneurs is, what role is God going to play in your business? Is God just a bit player? It's just a business which happens to be run by a Christian, or is it going to be a business which is intentional about Christian? It's intentional about having that kingdom purpose. So, in conclusion, look, that's what the book's about. As stewards, we must always use God's blessings, God's way for God's glory. The canvas provides a simple plan on a page, on 1 page for you to set up your kingdom business. And again, it's about building this capability for our church, for our families, our communities, and our church. Teach a man how to establish a fishing business, and you not only feed him for a lifetime, but bring benefits to his family, the community, and his church.